Okay, so going to record it, and so I read this book, and I've called this presentation, Trinity and the Hybrid Church: A Perspective on the Future of Yesterday, because we're trying to navigate this time of where are we in church, are we not in church, and what are things that we've really learned through a lot of sweat anyway, maybe a few tears, no blood, thankfully, over this past year with all the technology, and I think there are learnings that have happened that we don't want to let go as we move forward, and so all that to say is this time has thrown like 1,000 decisions, and it seems like every question that we ask, another 5 get asked or get raised, and it's been this kind of exhausting time of never really knowing what's going to happen or if you're doing the right thing, and even now there's so many decisions and questions about the details, and I think what's important for us as a faith community to do is to remember the why of our church, of our faith. And I want to speak a bit about what that means. And I think of it as, if we understand the why, then we can begin to look at the rest of it, this how and when and where and who. I think of those questions as like a means to the end, signposts, if you will, on this road to the why, to what we're about. And I was thinking about this idea of pastor as Sherpa. Now, Sherpa is, I think it's become known as like a guide, but they're really people, the Sherpa people that live in eastern Tibet, and but this idea of Sherpa, of guide, I like this idea. Shepherd is another one, but Sherpa is kind of cool. And this idea that I don't know what the journey is going to be like anybody else, but I do know as a pastor kind of what we ought to take along on the journey and what are some of the pitfalls that could happen. And so together as a community, we're going to journey to the why. And what I hope is that these few minutes we'll get some clarity together about that why. So as an example, when Mallory was asked in 1924, why are you climbing Everest? He responded by saying, because it's there. That was his why, I guess, his way of saying it's a challenge and I want to rise to that challenge. Edmund Hillary, who was the first person to summit along with his Sherpa guide, when he was 80 years old, said, all of my life I've been afraid of having nothing to do, having no challenges to meet, being bored. The whole of my life has been a battle against boredom. And that kind of makes me feel a little sad, but I mean that you're avoiding something as the why of your life. But that's how I understand his why. Now I came across this. I was doing some reading of various leaders, both in business and in church, and I came across this video, and it's really a brief, but it's one way of Disney answering their question of like, why Disney? Why would someone go to Disney? So I don't know why the video didn't come through of what he says. So father sending his daughter off to college is what that was. And he says something at the end like, and I'm not going to miss you at all. So it was kind of like this little bit of levity where, it's this time, but that was Disney's why. You create these memories that are never going to change. So come and spend money, and but it really, I think they were pretty effective about pulling at the heartstrings for people to at least wonder, maybe we should go to Disney. So why Trinity then? What is it that Trinity is about? I think this all of the questions and challenges can cloud our core reason for why we're here. And so I thought I would share a bit about my why of why I'm here. Why? How did I get here? And it begins with growing up in Ohio, going to I think we were in the LCA, the Lutheran Church in America. My parents were very active in the church. When I went off to college, though, I basically only went to church on Easter and Christmas, maybe for sure Christmas, maybe Easter I missed a couple. And then when I graduated from college, I started working in Mansfield, Ohio, and then ended up going out to Massachusetts and then Connecticut. But all that to say is I never had a church other than my, quote, home church, Peace Lutheran in Gahanna, Ohio. And so things were going well, but in my mid to late 20s, I had back-to-back relationships that, for lack of a better word, went down in burning flames. And they were painful. I had asked a woman to marry me, and she was, I think ultimately she said no, but she didn't say yes. It was this bizarre, what is happening? And I ended up saying, well, I think the answer is no, so that was really hard. And then she started, I'll say, stalking me. She would call, and so it really messed with me. And I ended up getting some psychotherapy. And through that process, if you've ever done that, they kind of make you question everything about your life as a way of beginning to claim what is meaningful to you. And in the meantime, I get transferred to Longueville, Illinois, and I start thinking about the decisions that I've made along the way, and is that the person I want to be? And what about this whole church thing? I spent a lot of time at a church growing up, so maybe I should try that again. And I went to Messiah, and I remember, this is probably 1993. 1992, I get transferred, and living in Palatine, Illinois, but I find Messiah. And I walk in, and Sue Kubicki is standing by the door like this, and she sees me and has a bulletin and says, "Hi, welcome to Trinity, and it's great to have you." And it was I don't remember the sermon, I don't remember anything else, but just this genuine, warm welcome to church. And so I started going to church, and over the course of a couple of years, I went to a Bible study. I started reading the New Testament before I had to go buy a Bible. Started reading the New Testament before work, and it got to the point where I'd get up, have a cup of coffee, and I was starting to be late for work because I just would lose track of time as I'm reading the New Testament, and eventually, started volunteering with the high school youth, and then left Kemper to go off to be a youth minister and then seminary. All that to say is that the why for me and my faith journey is my conviction that a Christ-centered faith community can transform a person's life, and can be life-giving. And that's my passion about ministry, is that a community can be a place where people can receive healing, receive affirmation, care for their souls in a way that liberates them for a better tomorrow and healthy relationships. And That's kind of the driver. That's my why. My sense of ecclesiology, or my sense of what the church is about, is that Christ is bringing people together around word and sacrament, and then sending them out to be people of hope, and that that a Christ-centered faith community has the power to transform individuals, and transformed individuals have the power to transform the world. And I believe that. That's just, it's naive or whatever, but I believe that because I know a Christ-centered faith community transformed my life. And I think that in our world and our climate, that a faith community has the power to continue to do that, to be a place of giving life in a community, and maybe now more than it ever has. So how and when and where and who and are signposts. And so for me, the summit, or the why, is creating this Christ-centered faith community that where people are healed through Christ, through shared mutual experiences, and support and encouragement and love. It's centered in ultimately the love of Christ poured into us, that we then share with others. So I read this book, Becoming a Hybrid Church, and Dave Daubert, one of the authors, used to work in Chicago at Churchwide in the evangelism area. He is now serving a church in Illinois, and I've prayed about it, thought about this book, and came up with this approach that kind of summarizes what I took from the book and how it might apply to Trinity. So that pre-March 2020, that ministry here was focused on, and I use the word organic, because in person, just to get tired of saying it, it's probably not anymore, because it's one less syllable, but anyway. It focused on an organic experience with an emerging digital or virtual presence, but that presence served the organic church. It wasn't like we saw, at least me, that I didn't see that the digital church, the live streaming, was a tool. It wasn't like its own thing. So it was kind of almost an afterthought. And if it didn't work, okay, But COVID happens, and all of a sudden, literally overnight, I remember meeting with preschool on Tuesday of March 10th or whatever to talk about some virus that I hadn't really been paying attention to. And that Friday, I was in a parking lot at a hotel in Grinnell getting ready to pick up Tommy because they're closing the school. It was just, and everybody, we share those stories of like, what hit us? But overnight, we've gone from a digital presence serving the organic to replacing the organic, basically. We went completely virtual overnight. And now the question is for tomorrow, are we, that we have the possibility that ministry focuses equally on organic, lived experience of church and the digital church, that it's not either or, one serving the other, but that we hold both in, I'll say, tension as possibilities for reaching the world with the gospel. So I wanted to kind of get into some specifics of what I remember pre-March 2020 Trinity to look like. Again, it was ministry focused on organic, being in person, with emerging or digital being like a second thought. Like I would never have thought, if we had this meeting a year ago, I should record this presentation. I would never have thought that. And so it's already kind of sinking in that, well, yeah, you got to record it. It's just kind of that almost becoming just part of the habit of what I do when I think about leading. So what we were doing, we were making technical innovations, not like substantial structural or organizational innovations. And we were making these innovations kind of tweaking what we had done in the past. So we had 2 Sunday services, both at the same, at the fixed time, 8:30 what was it, 8 and 9:30. And they were basically the same service, but differentiated by the liturgy, the music. I didn't wear an alb in one, and so, but pretty similar. But basically, the music was different. We moved to the narrative lectionary. That was somewhat innovative a few years ago. We added, Margie and I, with a second Thursday service, an occasional outdoor service or lakeside service, and that we live streamed to Facebook and our website, again, basically just making sure the thing was on and running and not really looking to see if anybody, watched or checked in or what have you. Our fellowship was an evangelism. We would have members invite friends. Possibly someone would see us on Facebook, and the idea was if they saw what it was like before coming here, people's anxiety would be lower and they could come. But again, the idea was getting people to come here, and that social media was like a tool to make that happen. And we, I don't know if this is a social justice, but we became a Reconciling of Christ congregation. The choirs, I think, had become a place of kind of fellowship for those members. Discipleship, growing in faith, was really weekly Wednesday morning Bible studies here. Sunday school, confirmation, that was about it for like formalized discipling. Stewardship, I thought at the time it was pretty innovative with the Stewardship for All Seasons. Bruce and Russ and I, David Cayley and Mary Manthai were on that team to try to infuse some energy into stewardship and to tell Trinity's story. And it's not like we're asking for money for the building, but we're seeking financial support for the ministries and for how we're changing people's lives, connecting with people, and different fundraising events. Our service, we collected food, we gathered clothing, Cover Bound was going on. We'd offer financial support for people paying rent and heat and such. We had a growing in-person collaboration with different ministries. The Outreach Center, the Welcome Center. We were talking with SELA, the human trafficking ministry. We were beginning to work with them. And an emerging, so within that context, an emerging sense of social justice. How do laws impact people's lives? That kind of thing. So the why for us of how we did that was it's what we've done in the past, and it seemed to be effective. I mean, it seemed to be working. We had anywhere from 40 to 60 people at the 8 o'clock service, if numbers is the way of measuring success, and we would have 130 to 160 at the second service. So there was a lot of energy, or renewed Sunday school. I mean, it seemed to be going well. And then COVID. And like we said, overnight it shifts from organic or in-person to digital. And so worship then, it was an abrupt end of organic ministry, and it forced this kind of chaotic turn to digital ministry. And we were really ahead of the curve because we'd already been streaming, so we had some of the infrastructure in place. So we went to one live stream service. It was a blend of music styles. Some of it, or all of it, was pre-recorded. We had some minor changes in the service order, but it mostly is unchanged. We ended the second Thursday service and began a Tuesday evening live stream meditation that initially I was just going to do it like that first Tuesday, and just Spirit kept nudging me to keep doing it, so we've been doing that. The fellowship and evangelism kind of do just a generic welcome online. We don't really kind of follow up with, or have a formalized follow-up with people who are checking in on our Facebook. We do updates, devos. I don't know why I'm looking there. I have this right here. so I do those telephone devotionals every morning for folks, and scripture posts. Kirsten's putting that out on the Facebook page. We have done attempts at parking lot gatherings for fellowship with, I'll say, moderate success, and probably mostly because of the weather right now. And then for discipleship, I guess I jumped ahead with the robocalls and virtual Sunday school. Sandy was trying to do that, but kids and parents are so overwhelmed with being on Zoom all day long. They didn't have the capacity, really, even though they may have had the desire to do more online stuff. And I'm working with Pastor Kevin and Pastor Cindy on a virtual confirmation. I did a 3-part video of the first 3 commandments, and Kevin is doing the middle 3, and Pastor Cindy is doing the final 4. So we're collaborating, trying to do some things to reduce the redundancy, I'll say, because if once in-person is taken out of the loop, then it seems like collaboration can happen more freely because you don't have to meet in someone else's building. You're just trying to connect with people. Stewardship, I remember Bruce talking about it one Sunday. I think we sent out a hard copy letter. Was limited, though. It wasn't like the brochures that we had and all the hopes that we had hoped to do, kind of leading up to it and having a celebration Sunday and all of the things that we've done in the past. We didn't do any of that. We have had, thanks to a couple handful of members, fundraising events with drive-up events. Our service has continued pretty well, if not more than it had been, with the food drop-off now monthly, and the Cover Bound has continued. We have some members that have taken a renewed participation in certainly the Grace Welcome Center, and that's been life-giving because of the demands that the economy has placed on people in Uptown. We've had social justice issues, trauma with the Jacob Blake, and that was divisive for our congregation as well as for the community, and it continues to be an issue, obviously, with racial equity in our country, and so for me, I think the digital approach hasn't helped our ability to gather and talk and process about some of these really challenging issues. It's hard to have a real, deep conversation about an individual or our sense of racial equity and how we think about races when you're on a Zoom or through emails and things. But the reason we moved for that is that we did it this way is out of concern for one another's welfare, I think primarily. We didn't want people to get COVID and die because they came to church or, become a long hauler or something. We did what was familiar to us, meaning the organic approach to ministry using digital tools, and we were overwhelmed by demand for new skills and tools, and so we really have tried to do our best to kind of keep things going. So starting tomorrow, meaning does Trinity see the possibility of a ministry that focuses or takes seriously this digital presence as much as it ever did with the organic or in-person? And that's what the hybrid church is about. It's not about either or. It's not even really about both and. It's about, this is the church now. This is what I think Trinity has the capacity to do. We'll see. This is how a church is now in a post-COVID, post-pandemic world. And so to build on the one live-streamed Sunday service where we continue to do that, but we now have limited capacity for people to come. And we will continue, I think, to offer pre-recorded offerings where people could do music at home, send the recording, and have that included in the service. So it's this mix. It's not like an either or. We may get to a place where we could have, say, the bell choir, Helen or musicians coming to play in person. But if their schedule wouldn't allow that, one of the things we learned is that we have the capacity now to allow them to share their gifts, like on Thursday night, recording it so that it can be a blessing on Sunday. I mean, I think that's a real gift that we've learned from this time. And I'm suggesting a music coordinator who supervises a pool of musicians, both paid and unpaid, so that we see the real kind of heart of what the music ministry here at Trinity is about the gospel in ways that kind of, how do I say that? You kind of take the theology piece and the experience piece and you separate it from the musical piece. And so we could have a musician that's gifted who may not even be a Christian. Maybe we'll think about that. But certainly one who is open to coming and playing, this Christian music that this music coordinator would develop. And so someone like Jean, for instance, wouldn't necessarily have to be here on Sunday. The music coordinator wouldn't have to be here because we would have these different musicians that would come in and play. So we would kind of schedule out what kind of service, what are the musical needs. This would be the music coordinator's role. And then, you would, I'll say, contract for a guitarist or a drummer or whatever, or an organist. And they would know that when to come and play. Or if we have, again, members who, let's say they're traveling and they won't be able to be here next Sunday, but they could come by on Monday afternoon and they could sing a quartet, then this music coordinator would ensure that gets recorded, and we put it into the PowerPoint for the live stream, and we receive those gifts of music. I think it's a blend of both styles. Again, for now, not saying we won't add services, so this isn't like locked in forever. It's just kind of basically the immediate future, what it could be like. Blend of styles, again, using both pre-recorded and live. And I think we ought to make significant changes in the service order of the live stream, because if we're going to when we start considering multiple services, then we need to think about the length of those services. And so we've kind of tweaked the service a little bit now, but I could see maybe we have, a song, and as opposed to 3 now, and we get the service to 35 or 40 minutes. And so that will require us thinking about, what is the heart of worship? How do we have meaningful, powerful worship for people who are coming both to be present as well as watching it online? I think we could reinstate the second Thursday service. We've typically had maybe 10 to 12 at most, and I think Margie's willing to continue to play that, and so I would see that happening again. I think the Tuesday evening meditation, though, I don't necessarily think I need to physically come and have someone else physically come to set the streaming up and get that going. I think we could record some material that could be as effective as a devotion. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be Tuesday evening, obviously, anymore. It can, again, that's kind of that thinking of needing to be present. We could increase the types of devotions that are being sent out, whether on our YouTube channel or Facebook. And then I think, again, blend of pre-recorded lectors, in-person lectors, and vocalists, that we're keeping in mind this option of recording people, so that there may be people who would never come and read in front of the congregation, but in their home they're happy to read into a mic and have that and recorded and shared. And so that adds, I think, to the participation in our community and adds more voices to the service. I think fellowship evangelism piece, I wonder about having this real-time social media engagement minister, a person who is maybe during the worship service itself casting out a question, trying to engage people who might be viewing, so that watching on Facebook isn't just like you're just observing, but inviting people into a dialogue. Because one of the things out of the book, it said, if you're not connecting with the people who stop by and watch or go to your website or whatever, then you're missing opportunities, because that's what people kind of yearn for. They want to be able to engage. Engage is the word I was looking for. So having a person, not David Cayley, who is, he's trying to get, the live stream up, and he's doing the Zoom before worship, and then he's running up and then coming back, but someone who can be monitoring the Facebook page and providing that feedback in real time. Similarly, during the week, a person who is looking at the postings on our Facebook page and seeing what kind of response and building relationships or engaging the people who come to our Facebook page and post, so that it becomes this lively exchange where relationships are formed. We have gatherings that allow for a combination of digital and organic participation. In other words, if we had a member who said, well, I welcome being on council or being in a leadership role, but I've got kids at home and there's just no way I can, find a sitter or something. Well, now we've gotten pretty accustomed to Zoom. We could have people who could come to church, and others could, participate through Zoom. So we're not either or, and we continue to receive those gifts. That's the part of this hybrid option. And also similarly with fellowship, Bible studies, even social gatherings that we might have, some small group ministries that we might have, we could always think about offering a digital option for that. I sent a note to Kirsten today asking if there's those e-cards companies, right? You can send an greeting, birthday card, or whatever. And so I was thinking, if we had a church e-card account and let the members of our church know that, then they could use that to send e-cards to one another as a way of, like, they're easy to do, they don't have a stamp and all these things, and yet I think they're kind of cool when you get one and something jumps out at you, and it's like, wow, you were thinking of me, it's amazing. And so I think that's one way of building connections, just a small way, just something I thought about. I thought about Trinity News, and I've talked to David Cayley about this. What if we cleared out the balcony so that was open, and we created a like a glass walled partition up there, and that would be like a recording studio, and we would have, instead of an e-tidings where people get these notes, maybe we have someone from our church be the host or the co-host, and they would invite, say, Mary Kay to come, and we have Mary Kay. She's our at-large council representative, and also connects with wellness. She's going to give us an update on kind of what's going on. And so now there's a video of this where people are sharing what's happening, and we could do those and little vignettes, as opposed to and this idea came because a couple weeks ago we had so many announcements that the service ended and we were still talking. And so I thought, why are we doing announcements this way when they're all recorded? I mean, it's just recorded. We could take that piece out of the service, especially when we think about in person, that we don't spend that precious time giving announcements that could be given in other ways, because people, really value this time of worship. So, and this sound recording area upstairs could be where we have guest musicians come to record. The music coordinator could, we'd have things set up so it's sustainable. It's not like, oh, how are we going to do it? I got to lug it in for my car. That there's equipment there that people have been trained on. They know how to use it. Maybe we have a tech person that comes in and, that's, so we're not asking the music coordinator to also be the tech person who's recording it and editing it and blah, blah, blah. But we create the kind of the infrastructure that these things can happen relatively easily. And so I think about like a podcast, which is different than, a listing of videos on a website, but to have a podcast that would either have sermons or devotionals, and I threw Life on 39th, as the name of a podcast that if people are driving to work or they're going for a jog, they could listen more effectively or easily to a sermon, devotional, conversation about Trinity news, whatever that might be. Discipleship, I mentioned this kind of engaging in real time during worship, kind of asking how is the text moving you, or what's being brought up in you by the sermon, or what's happening relative to the music. Those kinds of really engaging conversations that can happen on Facebook or email and such. Continue doing the robocalls, and then a combination of organic and digital activities for Sunday school and confirmation. Is there a way that the learning could take place at home, and then maybe service events could be done outside in the community so that we're getting that in-person mix. And then small groups, I think, where we use the technology so if people can't make it physically, they could still be here virtually. I think small groups is I think we have a great need for that. Stewardship, I think we have to expand the number of ways that people can give. One of the things that came up in the book is that nobody gives by text. They want to know if their information's secure, and so have other options for online giving that are easier for people to use. So basically accept the current e-giving applications that people are using so that they don't need to learn another one. Service, I think we're going to continue to collect food for people and distribute clothes, gather clothes. I think there are virtual service opportunities, though, that the book lifted up. There are companies that invite people to read books, record books for the blind, and you don't need to leave your home. You can, sign up and read, record the readings so that this company can put them together for people without sight to hear these books. And there are other things. We just have to maybe with some creativity, again, thinking of the digital church as a full-body church where people worship God, build relationships, grow in their faith, and serve their neighbor. And to be thinking what that might be, those are possibilities that for us to grow into. Again, this is the whole thing for me, is that a Christ-centered faith community has the power to transform individuals in a life-giving way, and that those people, once changed by that experience of grace and forgiveness, they have the power to go out and affect their world, their places of work, their homes, their families, and where there's a lot of grief right now, a lot of anxiety, that we could be kind of missionaries into our own workplaces and families. And so why would we do this? I think because whatever your why is. I had asked you to consider the time in your faith, in your life, where your faith went from like something you did to kind of like who you are. Like it became this, like a part of you in a way that it hadn't been before. Is that we're hoping that we can create those experiences for other people who are hurting or alone or despairing, for the sake of the world. So our why, what we're trying to do, we're not trying to get back to normal, because I think that's gone. But we're not trying to say, let's get everybody, we just want to get back, and that's just the way it's going to be. Because a lot of the studies that I've read, I shared a little bit already, if up to maybe a fourth of the people who have been going to church have said they're not going to go back in person because they enjoy the freedom of sleeping in on Sunday or going away for the weekend and then checking it out during the week. And so it isn't like we can just disband or stop, and I know no one's saying we're going to do that, but we have to realize that there are people who now experience the digital worship in really meaningful and powerful ways, just as much as the people who've missed being present, miss being here, and to not speak about one better than the other. They're just different. So as a hybrid church, we're discovering new normals on the road to why Trinity exists in the first place. So that being this hybrid church is who we are now. And eventually we'll stop saying, well, we're a hybrid church. Well, what does that mean? Well, we do this is who we are. And we offer these options of connecting virtually, of being here in person, and everything in between. So we transition into this new way of being church together. And so we continue to participate in God's mission of life by practicing these 5 kind of core. This is taken from the Acts 2 church, where people practiced hospitality, where they worshiped, where they grew in their faith, where they offered service, and people sold their homes and brought the money so that no one in the community had a need. So it's this radical hospitality, passionate worship, intentional discipleship, mission and service, and then extravagant generosity. I think that's what I have. So, So that is, that's the hybrid church. That's the kind of where I think we are now. And I think we have the possibility of living more fully into that. But it's going to take patience and curiosity and a lot of forgiveness, because mistakes are going to be made along the way. And computers aren't going to work when we want them to. And so, but through it all, God is going to be present, because that's who we're seeking to follow and to serve. And I think once we keep that in mind, then and use this idea of a Christ-centered, however you phrase it, but for me it's the transformational power of a Christ-centered faith community, to use that as a lens when we talk about, okay, so how are we going to have people come to church, or what is it going to mean to have Sunday school again? It all comes back to, well, how will this experience be loving and generous and faith forming, and to keep that central. And just one last comment. I participated in a text study this morning with 5 other pastors here in town, and I'm sharing with Mary before our meeting tonight. I said, I don't know about you, but it seems like preaching and pastoral care I was trying to be really transparent, has almost taken a back seat to editing a video so I can put it up on Facebook. It's like my call has almost been like reversed or seconded to the technological demands of our day to get the service out. And so I said to them, I wonder if we could commit to each other that for this week anyway, we preach on Sunday like it's our last sermon. You know, that same kind of passion. And I know I just put a lot of pressure on myself because you might be, oh, that was a really terrible last sermon, you know. But the sense was to kind of renew that priority of word and I mean, I'm a pastor of word and sacrament, not Facebook and editing software, you know. And so to, you know, my point with the colleagues was just, you know, let's remind one another, you know, I'll say who our first love is, you know, and let's be grounded in that, and then if we are, as I mentioned, I think in the email, God has lived through plenty of pandemics, and the church has survived, and the church will survive because Christ is risen. Hallelujah. So that's what I have. Thanks for listening. I'm going to turn off the video now here.